That the real South is not what you have been taught for the last 150, 60 years.
Hi, I'm Mr. Jack, and we're going on a journey. Thanks for joining me today. On my episode today, I have a special guest, Mr. Pete. He's a fellow driver. He's a professional chauffeur here in Nashville. He's written a book that I want to share with you. I think I have found it fascinating. So I will be interviewing him in just a few minutes. Now behind me is the Franklin Farmers Market. It's an incredibly busy place. Miss Sherry and I often come here to get our fresh produce. So, while y'all are watching my interview with Mr. Pete, I'm going to head inside and see if I can pick up some tomatoes and a few other things that we need. So I'll see you again at the end of the interview. So we're rolling. This is where it gets fun.
And if we have to, we can scrap the whole deal and do it again.
We can scrap it and do it all again. Exactly.
It's not like we can wear one-take artists, right?
We are not one-take artists. We are not. I'm with Mr. Pete. Mr. Pete is a fellow driver, but you're a unicorn, right?
I'm Sagittarius.
No. No, unicorn. That's what they call the native Nashvillians.
Okay, I'm a unicorn.
Because
but I was born in the country. I wasn't born in Nashville.
But you were within what, 20 miles of here?
Oh, I live less than 3 miles from where we're sitting right now.
A unicorn, in case you don't know, is what everybody calls the native Nashvillians because everybody's heard of them, but they've never seen one. So Mr. Pete would be considered a unicorn. That's why you're a unicorn. He's a Sagittarius also.
And Sagittarius.
I forget, how did we meet?
We met on a run together when two of the visiting teams were here for a soccer expo, and we were on call and spent the whole day together.
Oh, was that at the hotel by the airport?
Yeah, that was Marriott Hotel.
Marriott Hotel.
Yep, Airport Marriott.
Okay.
And we found out we had similar interests.
Which are?
Which the main conversation for the day was about the war between the states, but about the South in general and things that demonic fashion that we have been portrayed.
You got that.
We have been demonized for the most part since the war between the states, and I, along with Mr. Jack here, don't feel that's always justified. Now, there are plenty of horror stories to go around if you want to start looking for them. We're not going to try to convince anybody that we were pure of heart, but I will try to convince anybody who will listen to me that the real South is not what you have been taught for the last 150, 60 years.
Now, he brings up the real South for this reason. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Mr. Pete has written a book called The Real South. It's a great cover. I love it. What made you decide you want to write a book?
Well, I've thought about it since back in high school, really, and thought about how we had been so wrongly portrayed here. And I heard that exact phrase over and over when I was a kid, that wasn't the real South, because I heard a lot of stories from some of the old timers that actually walked around with some of these men that had their limbs sawed off due to the war between the states.
You knew some of the people who knew some of the people who were in this Civil War?
Yes. My granddad was born in 1886.
So 1886, that's just
A lot
30
of
years
these-
after the 20 years.
Yeah. A lot of these Confederate soldiers here in Nashville, Tennessee, lived till after the 1900s. As a matter of fact, the Confederate veterans had their where they meet with each other.
Reunion.
The reunion in 1897 here in Nashville, Tennessee. About the same time we had an expo out here where we're sitting, same year. That was 101 years after the state of Tennessee became a state. So the Confederate veterans held their convention, that's the word, they held their convention here in Nashville, Tennessee, and a lot of people who've been to Ryman Auditorium don't know this, but all that balcony they sit in upstairs was built by the Confederate veterans because it wasn't big enough to hold all the people that would be attending their event. They over doubled the size of Ryman Auditorium and spent their own money when they had their convention here.
When was the convention?
1897.
Ryman was built.
And Ryman was finished in 1893. It
Okay.
started in 1885 and it was finished in 1893.
I have to be careful with Mr. Pete because he knows a lot about a lot. But I really want to find out more about Mr. Pete and this book. So that's what we're doing here today. So Mr. Pete,
Right.
you're going to have to confine yourself to this book, if at all possible.
I'll try to.
All right. When did you start writing this? Because this is what, almost 400 pages. When did you start writing?
2 years ago in August.
When did the story come to you?
Well, I heard these stories over and over. I just had to put them together and make a timeline for it. But I heard these stories all my life growing up of things that happened to people in and around Middle Tennessee here. And
So, well, the main characters are fictitious, correct?
the family is fictitious. The events are quite real.
Well, I know it's because I'm not done with the book. But every time I turn a page, like I just turned the page and came to Ravenswood
Mhm.
and the Wilsons.
Yeah.
Well, if you go back to one of the episodes on Mr. Jack's Journey, I think it was called Getting Personal. If you see the opening or the ending shot, where I did that on the front porch, that's at Ravenswood. So when I turned the page and I saw Ravenswood, man, what, you got to be kidding! I've been there. And then we're at Belmont.
Yes.
We're out on Franklin Pike. We're meeting Adelcia. Adelcia. Yeah, we're meeting people that lived here in Nashville. If you're a history buff, and if you spend any time at all around Nashville, going to the plantations, we're talking about the Overtons.
Yes. Yeah, all these people were highly influential in the battle, or the battles in and around Nashville, Tennessee.
He brings up, say her name again.
Miss Adelcia Hayes.
Adelcia, but she was married to a Franklin, and then married to an Acklin.
That's correct.
And then I think she had one or two more there.
Finally, a fellow named Cheatham.
Was he a Civil War general?
Not a general. He was a Civil War captain, I think, is the highest rank he got. But yes.
The book gets my motor going because I've been in Nashville about 4 years, and I've been to every one of these places that I've read about so far, with the exception of, you mentioning Fairview?
Yes.
Where is Fairview?
That was Isaac Hayes' plantation in Gallatin, Tennessee. It is the centerpiece of the golf course, the Fairview Golf Course, right on Gallatin Road, just before you get into Gallatin, driving up Gallatin Road out of Nashville.
And it's still there? The house is still there?
Yes, the house is still there. And a couple of outbuildings on the grounds. Yes.
What do you hope the book will accomplish? What do you hope it's going to do?
Well, quite honestly, I hope it makes me some money. But what I hope the message of this book is to allow...
Southerners usually aren't that real.
Well, they may not be that broke, but But I hope this book can put some true enlightenment on the South. Now, I may get a little bit broader than Mr. Jack wants me to. But one thing about the South was there is a great deal of difference in slave traders and slave owners. Slave traders treated the slaves strictly as property. And for the most part, they were cruel. They were indifferent. If they died, they'd just drag them a few feet off the road and keep on going if they were on a journey with them. But slave owners, when they bought their slaves, they were more like family. And they treated them like family. They became a part of their everyday life. And those kids that grew up with the slaves didn't look at them as property at all. A lot of those slaves that were sold to the plantation owners, another word that's been demonized, a lot of the slaves had no desire to leave when that war was over. They had no desire to leave that plantation. That was their home and their families. And a lot of them were drug away kicking and screaming in Yankee wagons.
Now, often when we talk about these things, it's a very general term. Yes, there were a lot that did not leave. And I know some of you watching this are going to say you have instance after instance where they did leave. It's all true. I think what you're trying to do is show that there was a balance. There were some that left. And I've got a future episode coming up. Wait till y'all hear this one lady's story. Her family didn't leave after the war, but I'm going to save that for her. She's a beautiful lady. Her ancestors are slaves, but her story is one of victory and not of victimhood. So
I hope this book portrays that if you read it. Now, another thing that history does not cover, especially here in Nashville, Tennessee, is, and you can relate to it this day and time, if you can imagine a city with less than 17,000 citizens, and after Lincoln started putting boots on the ground and attacked the South, if you can imagine over 20,000 Union troops showing up in your city, imagine where all the resources went. And that number would swell to over 31,000 before that war was over. They stayed down here 7 years, from 1860 to 1867.
So they had 31,000 Union troops here in a city of 17,000 natives.
Basically, that was it. And they showed
Almost
up in
double.
about 3 weeks to a month's time, over 20,000 Union troops in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, guess what happened when they wanted something? They went and took it.
You're going to find, as I continue this series, I'll be honest with you, I'm on a journey. I hear so much on both sides of this that I'm not going to tell anybody your opinion should be this, shouldn't be mine, shouldn't be Mr. Pete's. I'm trying to take this stance that facts don't care about my feelings. I want to dig up the facts. I'm looking for America's soul, and somewhere I think this is part of America's soul. Mr. Pete, if you would, before we quit, tell me the main character or main characters that this story is revolving around.
Well, that kind of changes depending on how life changed for them. If I had to name a main character in this book, it would be Miss Elmore, Miss Ann Elmore.
Was she real?
Well, there were real people just like her, but she's fictitious as well. She's a part of this family and a fictitious part, but her story is real, absolutely real. Now, I want to say one other thing since Mr. Jack got me talking about it. This book does not promote anything. This book does not condemn anything. It's merely a snapshot of how rough life was for the people in and around Nashville, Tennessee, that 7 years that the Union troops occupied this city. It was a tough time to live in Nashville, Tennessee.
But this is starting 20 years before the Civil War, correct?
Correct.
And are we going to go through Reconstruction? I don't want him to tell me too much. You see, I'm only that far. Are we going to go through Reconstruction?
No,
We're just gonna
this
go through
this ends about 2 years after the war ended, but it does not end while the Yankees still occupied most of the city, because they stayed here until 1867. Not the whole 20,000, but there were plenty of troops, thousands of troops that stayed here all the way until 1867 in the city of Nashville.
Wow. So the name of the book is The Real South, and it's by Pete Harris. Where can they buy this?
It's available on Amazon in paperback version, of course, and in the ebooks version as well. If you are a Kindle subscriber, I think it's free to read.
We're going to hear more from Mr. Pete in the future because he's working on book number 2, which do you want to tell me a little bit about book number 2?
Book number 2 is totally different from this book here. However, it is a book about history as well, and the name of that book is When Leeper's Fort Was Hillsboro. I grew up in what is now Leeper's Fort, and there are plenty of stories that went with that city that wasn't always the artsy little place it is now. It was quite rough, and there's a lot of characters that were.
Now, a little bit more about Mr. Pete is that you grew up with these deep South people from this little tiny town. So a lot of that's going to be first-hand stories in book number 2, right?
These are things that I experienced myself in book number 2 when I tell you a story. These are things I was in and around and witnessed for the most part, or was a part of it a lot of times.
Mr. Pete, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Is there any other way people can get hold of you?
But you're free to email me if you'd like, PeteWHarris@gmail.com, and you can reach me there, and I will respond to you if you send me an email.
Mr. Pete also gives tours here in Nashville. He and I both do that. So I think you have two good guides here if you want to see the Deep South. I hate to say this, takes away from me, but he's the better guide. At least he knows more. My car's newer.
He's too humble. He talks far better than I do. He just doesn't talk as much and as fast as I do.
Pete, thank you, man. I appreciate it, buddy. All right. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks, Mr. Pete. This one and this one. All right, thank you. I certainly will. Okay, got some Bradley tomatoes. Now I'm over here and get some jam. Well, let's just do this for now. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Well, thank you, Mr. Pete, for that interview. It's a rare thing to find someone who's knowledgeable and eager to share about history, and also have some first-hand experience on some of the stories. You saw Mr. Pete's email on the episode. I think it was PeteWHarris@gmail.com. Write him. You also saw you can get the book at Amazon. Grab a copy while you can. Dig into the history, the local history. We'll be seeing more of Mr. Pete. I'll be doing more on the My America series. I guess it's really where my passion is. It's what I really like. But I'll need your help. Comment, ask questions, provide some additional knowledge on the subjects that you see on these episodes. Put them in the comments below. I'll answer and give other people an opportunity to get into the discussion on I call it My America. I guess it's Our America. I'll appreciate any comments that you put, and if we can get a discussion going on different topics, I'll do some research. I'll ask Mr. Pete and some of the other local historians. So I guess that's about it for now. But let me show you what I got at the farmer's market. You saw the tomatoes, but I also got some strawberry preserves. From my understanding, there at the farmer's market, they have to either make or grow everything there. They sign an affidavit, so this is not store-bought stuff elsewhere and then just brought in boxes. They have to make it. And this is really good. I don't know if you like okra, but the okra is really, really good. This is a pickled product. Miss Sherry and I just take it out of the jar and just eat it. I'll eat some on the way home. And the last thing that I got was raspberry preserves, red raspberry preserves. They grow their raspberries, they pick them, they mash them up, cook them, whatever it takes to make this delicious raspberry preserves. You make some hot biscuits, slathered with a big slab of butter on those biscuits, and put some of this on there. It's fantastic. So I think that's about it for now. I appreciate you joining me on today's episode, and we will see you next week. It's been a while since I told you, but make sure you tell your mom and them I said hey.